On St. Firmin's Day, foolhardy young men, along with a few even more foolish tourists, run through the ancient streets of Pamplona pursuing young bulls. It used to be a sacred bull's inflation ceremony, a world-famous festival in northern Spain. The young bulls are channeled into the arena, where man and beast have to bear the burden of proving their adulthood. In Spain, real bullfighting is a traditional ritual, a pageant, not a pastime, a bloody sacrifice of bulls stemming from pagan times. Today, the bulls have a chance to get their own back sometimes. Growing up is often bewildering, certainly here for the adolescent bulls. But are the young lads really better off? It's said that a bull which participates in the running won't be used later in the corrida, the combat with the torero. You see, the horned could have learned a trick or two. Well, pagan times are over, and man is supposed to be the most intelligent and civilized creature on this planet of ours. It's a pity that he doesn't behave like it a lot of the time. Still, these youngsters have a chance to do better. If you go down to the Siberian woods these days, you're sure of a big surprise, and not necessarily a pleasant one, except for snake lovers. Goldilocks needn't worry about these bears, because they're only babies, and there aren't any wolves left in this part of the forest because all the grandmas they used to feed on have moved out. But wait, what's this? A tiger? Well, seeing is believing, even if his stripes do make him merge into his surroundings. Oh, I can't bear to watch. The tiger is so well camouflaged that Goldilocks goes on picking berries. And it's just the berries that interest our nosy tiger so much, which seems to puzzle some of the others. You never know what wild beasts are going to do, so you'd better watch out. Or, even better, learn some judo, karate, or freestyle wrestling. Especially when you can't run away anymore. Hey, wait a minute. The tiger's running away. What's going on here? Well, if you haven't guessed already, the tiger was an actor. And in this film, it's the camera crew that's locked in a cage. The film star is called Pushk, and he's pretty pleased with his performance so far. He certainly deserves his morning dip. The other actors, Margarita Nazarova and Konstantin Konstaboburski. They're both animal trainers. Now, for the next take, even Margarita believes in safety first and directs the act from behind the camera. Most stars are driven home by a chauffeur after a hard day's filming, and Pushk is no exception. He offered the camera crew a lift, but they suddenly decided that they needed the exercise and walked. Most people have dogs or cats as pets. Margarita has big cats, and she keeps 2 of them in her flat. And needless to say, she's never been burgled. The other tiger is called Radar, and she and Pushk get on quite well, considering tigers are normally solitary animals. The only trouble is, Radar is a bit goody-goody. She never gets into any trouble. Tiger Radar says nervously, "Pushk, what are you doing now?" "Oh, nothing, just tasting that marshmallow." "Silly, that's Margarita's face powder, you foolish cat." The trouble is, Radar always seems to get the blame for everything that Pushk does. He's so clever, he usually gets away with it. Well, most times he does, but he's bound to go too far one day, and I think today might be just that day. Margarita is already suspicious that things are so quiet and starts shouting for all she's worth. So Radar thinks that she'd better go in and explain that the silence has got nothing to do with her. But all she gets for her trouble is a bonk on the nose. There's no justice. But there's not enough room for two girls in the bath anyway. Meanwhile, Pushk has had another of his brainstorms, and even he thinks he might have gone too far this time. Uh-oh, it looks as if Margarita is at last going to put the blame where it really lies. But no, poor old Radar is getting told off as well. She can't win, can she? Actually, for this acting sequence, Margarita has to be quite strict with the pussycats. No matter how tame they may seem, tigers are very unpredictable, even when they've been brought up from cubs, so they must always be treated with respect. Radar believes that eventually she can beat them all. Margarita is well aware of this, be it in her home or at work in the Moscow State Circus. There's an old saying that you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Well, at the annual frog leaping contest in Calaveras County, California, they'll try any trick to prove how wrong the saying is. But in every group, whether it's people or frogs, there's always one who won't play ball. No, sir. The frog's supposed to jump. Oh, well, he'll learn sometime. And our next story is also about learning. Early morning in the village of Panglar in northern Thailand is not quite the same as early morning anywhere else in the world. Oh, dads go off to work like dads do everywhere. But in this village, it's not only the human kids who go off to school. Here, the elephant kids go as well. Not to the same school, of course, but to their own special elephant training centre. At 6 a.m. every morning, the teachers come around to get their charges ready for school. The elephants are tethered in the forest overnight on long chains so that they can forage for food. This means that they've had breakfast by the time their teachers, or mahouts, arrive. The young elephants are given a rub down, and then they're led off to have their morning bath. Meanwhile, the village children are settling down for their morning's work. School starts very early here, so it's not surprising that some elephants, like some people, find it difficult to get up in the morning. This is going to make him very late for his morning bath. And they're going to be late as well. Still, they don't seem too worried. Perhaps their names are right at the bottom of the teacher's register. Elephants have to wash themselves or be washed every day, both before and after work. If they're not, their skin can dry and crack or become infested with parasites, which is most unpleasant. This is also a good time for strengthening the bond of friendship between each elephant and his mahout, a friendship that normally lasts a whole lifetime. By the time the elephants finish their bathing, the villagers are already on their way to tend their fields of cotton, tobacco, rice, and sugarcane. This school has a class of 8 pupils in the youngest grade. The first lesson is called picking up the mahout's ko-chung. That's what his stick is called. It's a game they play every day before they saddle up to begin the real lessons. The saddles are made of a padded reed matting. While the children are getting dressed, their parents are on the way to work in the forest. These are the saddles. As you can see, there are about 4 reed mats. The 2 wooden breeching blocks, which form another part of the saddle, are there to keep the chains off the elephant's backbone when it's pulling a heavy load. The pulling part of the load is taken on the front breast strap, which is called a libel, and it's made of bark. Normally, young elephants stay with their parents almost as long as human children do, and like humans, they learn by watching their parents. They're very intelligent animals, and when working on slippery river banks in the forest, they can judge the safest way of doing a thing to the inch. They're extremely patient and methodical animals. Drawing logs will probably be one of the elephant's main jobs in the forest, so the school gives them plenty of practice at it. Old Lazy may not be able to get up in the morning, but when he is awake, he works very hard. This may look a very simple thing to do, but don't forget, the elephants have to be taught to do it on command. If the mahout and his elephant don't work as a single unit when they're out in the forest, these are the adults, by the way, then it could be disastrous for both man and beast. The tandem pull is used to get 2 elephant power on a heavy load along a narrow trail. Where there's more room, they can pull side by side, though this has to be learned as well. Pulling logs or pulling hair in the classroom, intelligence comes with schooling. In fact, it occurs to me that, given the intelligence of the elephant, this training school may exist more to develop the bond between mahout and animal than to teach the elephants to do something that they can probably work out quite well for themselves anyway. Anything my big brother can do, I can do better. And he can as well. Well done, Junior. And just to prove that it wasn't a fluke, the headmaster of the school is going to put them through their paces. You could call these elephant cranes. A pat on the head means kneel. Notice the way the back elephant gets up. How about this for cooperation? There's the pat again. And he just dropped it. Still, never mind, he'll learn. That's what schools are for. It's also by making mistakes that we learn. And just to make sure that the children don't make too many mistakes, the teacher's calling them in for another lesson. The little children and the somewhat bigger ones. By the time an elephant is 25 years old, he can understand all of the 24 words of command that he needs to know, plus what all the signals mean. Signals like the mahout's various nudges and scratches behind his ears, what the stiffening and changing pressures of the mahout's knees indicate. With this knowledge, the bond of friendship sealed, and the odd piece of his favourite banana trunk as a reward, he should live a long and contented life. OK, lads, tea break. Tea break, in elephant terms, means lumps of chopped banana trunk. Wild bananas grow like weeds all over northern Thailand, and the elephants love it. After sugarcane, it's their favourite food. They normally wash it down with about 60 gallons of water a day. At last, for the village children and for the young elephants, school is over for the day. The adult working elephants return from the forest, where at least one can't resist bringing his work home with him. Imagine, if you can, heavily armoured medieval knights charging into battle astride these great horses. Because that's what they were bred for, originally. Later, of course, they were used for all sorts of work, including pulling the farmer's plough. But nowadays, they've been replaced by tractors. Or have they? We'd like you to meet Cabaret and Flower, two beautiful white Percheron mares. Percherons were originally French battle horses. These two are being harnessed up by 81-year-old Jack Pierce, world champion ploughman, to give us a demonstration of how ploughing used to be done. The piece that goes under the tail is called the dock strap, and the tail has been banged up, which means tied up and plaited to keep it out of the chains and the mud. Looks neat, doesn't it? The plough we'll be using is called a Norfolk Ransom, and it was designed in 1864. The cutting blade, or share, is at the front of the mould board, and that's what turns the cut furrow over. In front of this, the knife coulter and disc coulter. You'll see what they do later. At the rear, a chain drags in the furrow to turn the weeds into the ground, and the whole furrow is made to look neat by these boats. The plough runs on two spoked wheels. Harness bells, very traditional, nobody really knows why. Perhaps they were for warding off evil spirits in the old days. Farmers used to live close to the earth and understood the earth's spirits. Two strong chains take the weight of the plough. They're attached to a rigid frame around the neck collar so the horse draws the weight of the plough with its shoulders. The shoulders and the flanks of a horse are where its pulling muscles are. It's hard to imagine, but all these lovely horses, including Cabaret and Flower, were in the slaughterhouse when veterinary surgeon Carl Boyd found them. He bought them all, Suffolks, Clydesdales and Percherons, to live on his farm in Surrey in England. Later, he found there were still a lot of people interested in watching ploughing demonstrations with big horses, so he formed the Southern Counties Horse Ploughing Association. Now, experts like Jack Pierce, who started competition ploughing when he was a boy of 10, come here regularly to practice their skill. At 81, Jack can still throw the 330-pound plough around as if it weighed nothing. Now he and his team draw thousands of enthusiastic spectators whenever they visit shows and fetes up and down the country. Look at those sparkling horse brasses. How'd you like the job of keeping those polished? And so, to the ploughing. First, a shallow cut is made with a very pointed shear. This is called a scratch furrow, and it's done to form a ridge for the proper furrow to rest against. Oh, don't look so worried. We're not going to plough up your whole field. That's a pretty straight scratch furrow, isn't it? At the end, Jack carefully measures the width of the next cut. People sometimes think farmers only plough to sow seed, but there are other reasons. To drain the soil, to fertilise, to loosen, and to air it before planting. It's usually done from both sides of a field into the middle, so no odd bits get left along the edges. You see, it requires some strength to hold the plough and horses in line.
I tell you, I saw him myself, ploughing up our field. Where? Over there. Where? Oh, yes.
Once the depth of cut has been decided, the land wheel is adjusted accordingly. This wheel runs on the land side of the furrow. What was that silly goose saying? Oh, pay no attention. Give them the cold shoulder. I said shoulder. Once the scratch furrow has been made, the pointed share is changed for the actual ploughing shear. There, off it comes, and the other one is wedged back on. with the help of an old cigarette packet. Well, every trade has its secrets. A lot of people think that the mould board is the ploughshare, but as you can see, it's not. The shear is only the pointed tip on the end. Somebody sounds impatient to get on. Only one more adjustment now. Remember the knife coulter? That's lowered so that it slices the ground vertically at the right depth, just ahead of the shear. The disc coulter, that's the round disc you can see there, make sure that the knife coulter doesn't get clogged with weeds. And that's how it works. The disc coulter cuts the weeds so that the knife coulter can make a clean vertical cut. Then the plough shears dig a clean furrow so that the mould board can turn the furrow neatly over against the last cut. Simple, but ingenious. At one time, between about 1850 and 1930, when all ploughing was done this way, there were more than 2 million heavy working horses in Britain. But by the 1960s, there were only about 2,000 left. Now, suddenly, they seem to be on the increase again, in farm work anyway. Perhaps they've suddenly remembered that, among other things, a horse doesn't need filling up with expensive petrol every few miles. And they're much friendlier than a tractor. So, scenes like this may not be so rare in the future. A man and his horses. A horseman. Here too. How many times have you seen this in a cowboy film? Well, this is a story about cowboys, but not the sort you're used to seeing. These cowboys are gauchos. They don't live in the American West, but on the pampas of Argentina and Uruguay in South America. These wild horses are Uruguayan. They're a breed descended from the horses which escaped from the early Spanish settlers in the 1580s. Once a year in the autumn, the wild herds are rounded up. They take part in the big rodeos in Montevideo, and then they're trained as ordinary mounts. And this scene could easily be from an American cowboy film, couldn't it? Strong and very high-spirited, these wild horses make fantastic bucking broncos. Though you wouldn't think it to look at them here. At the beginning of every rodeo, they always have a grand parade. The gaucho is a cross between the native Indians and the early Spanish settlers, and they always parade their best gear. The stirrup is covered in silver, and the saddle too. No matter how poor a gaucho is, he'll always find money for these silver trappings. It's said that he'd sell his wife before he'd sell his silver saddle, which he might regret because the saddle can't cook the dinner, can it? The large silver dagger is called a fathon. And the last piece of equipment is the leather-plated lasso, just like the American cowboys use. Calf roping is a very popular event. Here, the gaucho must lasso the front feet of the calf to bring it down. Missed. Don't laugh, you're next. Missed again. But watch this. The loop drops on the ground in front of the calf steps into it, and he's still trying. The wild horses are herded into a narrow pen called a brete, so that they can be harnessed. No saddles here, just a bridle. The word rodeo comes from the Spanish word rodar, which means to go round, and you'll soon see that everyone certainly does plenty of that. Notice the way that a small gate pens the horses individually so that they can get the bridle on. The small gate also makes sure that they only go out one at a time. Once out of the brete, the horse is run around the arena to tire it a little. Then it's tied to a large upright stake called a palenque with a rope called a sobaro. At this stage, the gauchos watch the horses very carefully because an experienced eye can tell which way the horse will buck when it's released with a man on its back. The rules are simple. The bell is rung as the rider mounts, and he has to stay on until the bell rings again. Well done. A good ride. And because he can't get off a bucking bronco, 2 other riders lift him off. Well, that's how it's supposed to happen. Every horse has a different style of bucking. A cow kick is when it kicks forward with its back legs. A strike is when it kicks forward or backwards with its front legs. And kicking is when it kicks backwards with its back legs. Have a look at this and see if you can spot the different styles. That side turn's different. Most gauchos start riding at the age of 4. It's either that or get yourself some strong glue. And it also helps if you're made of rubber, but for those that aren't. In spite of all this falling off, gauchos can train a horse to saddle and bridle in just one day. A gaucho calls his favourite trained horse a bingo. We won't go into what he calls the others. You're about to witness a natural phenomenon, an avalanche. Thousands of tons of snow crashing down a mountain. You'd best step out of the way. In case you weren't quick enough, there are animals which will come to your rescue. At least in the Austrian Alps, there are Alsatian dogs specially trained to detect people buried under snow. These are young dogs being trained. Somewhere out there, they've buried an instructor, and part of the young dog's training is to watch an experienced dog try to find him. Another instructor sets the scene for them to make it seem more real. And off they go to find their booty. And when the paws can't make it, a shovel might. The diggers never come in until the dog's sure he's in the right place. It's the dog with his sense of smell that decides where the men should dig. Now you see how important their training is. It wasn't always the Alsatian that did this work. It used to be the St. Bernards from across the mountain. The great St. Bernards. Many a lost traveller in centuries past had cause to thank this noble beast. It all started here, in Switzerland, in 1660, at the hospice of the great St. Bernard. And St. Bernards are still bred here, but not as avalanche dogs anymore, just as pets. The monastery, the dogs, and the pass get their name from Bernard of Menthon, who lived from 923 to 1008 AD. It was he who built the first monastery here, to provide shelter and refreshment to travellers using the St. Bernard Pass. The pass, the highest in Switzerland, has been used since the Bronze Age, and the dogs that bear St. Bernard's name may be just as old. It's thought that the Romans may have brought them from Tibet as guard dogs. Then it was discovered that they had an uncanny sense of direction, even in a snowstorm, so the monks started training them to guide people through the treacherous mountain passes, then later to find people buried in the snow. Some became so expert they could sense a person buried 300 yards away. One such famous dog was Barry. he personally saved 40 lives. Now, in his honour, the largest of the dogs here is always called Barry. In over 2 centuries, the St. Bernards have saved the lives of 2,000 people. He'll never save a life. He'll grow too fat and too heavy at 12 stone to get into the mountain rescue team's helicopter. Plus the fact that Schäferhunds, that's the German name for Alsatian, are very much better at the job. Rather sad, isn't it, after so much loyal service? Still, as far as the world's concerned, the St. Bernard will always be the only mountain rescue dog, trotting out with his little keg of brandy, which he actually never wore. Strange as it may seem, too much exercise can be harmful to a full-grown St. Bernard, but the younger dogs can't get out often enough. You see how big and heavy they grow, and strong too. They've got their thick coats on because up here, even in summer, it's only around 16 degrees centigrade, and in winter it can fall to 30 degrees below. Another hazard at this 8,000 feet altitude is thin air. It causes the dogs and the monks to suffer from rheumatism and heart disease, which does shorten their lives. Back now to today's lifesaver. He's still at it. You don't think he could be digging in the wrong place, do you? Wrong place? Him? Well, he's not wearing this Austrian Mountain Rescue Service jacket for nothing. This young trainee seems to have found something as well. Well, he's found something, but not the buried instructor. Now there, he knew it all the time. Never mind, you're only a beginner. In veterinary circles, they're saying that it's very hard these days to find good personal assistants. So hard that Dr. Uyana of Japan has had to employ one of his friends to help out. No, that's not a patient. That's the friend. He's called Chosuka. He's 3 years old, and he's very fond of dogs. Dr. Uyana, who lives on the southern Japanese island of Kyushu, found Chosuka in Tokyo, in a pet shop, and they liked each other straight away. It's just as well that they did, because you need to get on with the people you work with. It's much easier to put the patients at their ease then. I mean, as you probably know yourselves, it can sometimes be quite frightening going to a hospital for the first time. It can be even more frightening if the doctor turns out to be a chimpanzee. Unless you're another animal, that is, then it can be very reassuring. Come on, be reassured. That's better. Dr. Uyana says that sometimes Chosuka gets so fond of the patients that he can't bear to see them go. Hey, it's not going home time yet. If you go down to the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise, especially if the woods are outside the town of Toulouse in southern France. There, people with pigs on leads are searching for part of the soul of France, and they're doing it in the rich mould around the base of oak trees. They're looking for truffles, which are a sort of underground mushroom. And it's a fact that pigs are very good at sniffing out underground mushrooms. The truffle is considered a great delicacy, but some people are worried because there's a danger that it's becoming extinct. The truffle hunters blame it on a lack of thunder and lightning. The truffle eaters say it's because the farmers haven't been saying their special truffle prayers. There's talk of scientists trying to grow truffles in the laboratory, but the idea of growing part of the soul of France in a test tube is enough to make even the pigs shudder. Driving his 1955 Hillman Minx, this is Mr. Harold Bate from Devon in England. He's on his way to his local garage to get some fuel for his car. Well, nothing unusual about that, you might say. Millions of people do it every day, but his garage is different. Here, it's not petrol pumps, but pigs that provide the fuel. Every couple of weeks or so, Mr. Bate pops in here to see if his friends the pigs have any leftovers they can spare. He is usually in luck, and the man the pigs employ to do the work around the place helps him fill up a couple of sacks with pig dung. Yes, that's what Mr. Bate comes to get, because he's invented a way of running his car on it. And while all this shoveling is going on, I'll leave you to think about that for a moment.
Right, thanks, John. Thanks very much. That's right, that's right.
No, he doesn't put it straight into the tank or spread it over the engine. He takes it with him to his 450-year-old cottage and gets to work with a little wizardry.
Have him ready for
Well,
putting in.
actually, it's really chemistry. In this shed, he's set up his own fuel-making machine with a rather grand title, a manure extractor plant. In fact, it's all very, very simple. He loads the pig dung into a metal container, adds straw to form carbon and water to form hydrogen, and allows the whole thing to rot for a couple of weeks. As it rots, it gives off methane gas, and that's what Harold Bate uses to drive his car. He reckons that 30 cubic feet of methane is equal to a gallon of petrol, so about 100 pounds of pig dung is the same thing as a full fuel tank. It doesn't have to be pig dung, though. Any dung will do, but some dung is definitely better than others. It seems the general rule is the greater the stink, the stronger the gas. And the best way to tell how good the gas is to ignite it. Yes, well, it's stronger than it looks because it burns invisibly. So it's now ready to be put in the car. First, it has to be forced by a compressor, that's what this little engine is, into the yellow gas cylinder. A cylinder like this will drive a car for about 60 miles. And what's even more important these days, it doesn't pollute the air with poisonous fumes. Now, as you probably know, petrol engines puff carbon monoxide into the atmosphere, and that's very poisonous. Methane gas, on the other hand, is completely clean. Not only that, if you run an engine on gas after it's been run on petrol, the gas actually cleans the engine. And it's more powerful because it's 127 octane, whereas the most powerful petrol is only 101 octane. I bet you're all somewhat surprised at this and want to know how it's done. Well, as soon as Mr. Bate has connected up the gas tanks, we'll show you. And this is it. It's just a valve that's opened and closed by suction from the carburetor. The carburetor is a device that vaporizes the petrol and sprays it into the car's cylinders, where it explodes and drives the car. With the autogas converter, the carburetor does exactly the same thing, but with methane gas instead of petrol. See? That's pig power. I don't know whether that last story really qualifies as animals at work, but the next one certainly shows animals working. Falcons have been used for hunting for hundreds of years. Birds of prey have hooked beaks to tear the meat with and strong, sharp claws to catch their prey. That's why falconers wear thick leather gauntlets. Falcons are very nervous birds, so they're often hooded when a lot of people are around. If the birds can't see what's going on, they stay calm. These hoods are based on very old and intricate designs. The hood is all part of the routine and tradition of falconry. Before flying, the bird has to be weighed just like a boxer. A bird that's too thin won't have the energy to fly, and one that's too fat won't want to catch anything. He looks as though he's wondering how he got into this falconry game in the first place. It was actually the Chinese who first hunted with falcons over 4,000 years ago. By the 4th century AD, it had spread to the Middle East and Europe. After the introduction of shotguns, hunting with birds lost a good deal of its popularity. But in Britain, it developed into a sport. Here, in a village called Newent, in the southwest of England, birds are bred not only for hunting. Some of them have become quite famous in films, like ours. It's hardly surprising that many people abandoned falconry in the Middle Ages. A gun doesn't require as much attention as a bird. It can take anything up to a month of patient practice to train a falcon, and then it needs attention every single day. You can't just go away on holiday for a fortnight and leave it. If you're going to be a falconer, you've got to be prepared to care for and fly the bird every day. Except when they have young to feed, the wild birds only hunt when they're hungry. So they spend a lot of their time just sleeping, preening, playing, and bathing. So, in captivity, when the lady wants a bath, she must be allowed to have one. After all, when you're on show to the public every day, there's all the more reason to keep up appearances. The sight of a lady bathing in public is obviously not the sort of thing a well-brought-up seeker stag approves of. But at least there's more privacy for the breeding of birds. Kestrels are the best birds for breeding, but tawny owls also breed well in captivity. But we're more interested in flying at the moment. This bird is a lanner falcon and comes from the deserts of the Middle East. The jester's bells on the legs are there so that the falconer will know where the bird is if it flies into a tree. But I don't think it'll do that at the moment because it's quite hungry. On the end of a long piece of string is the lure. The lure is just a piece of raw meat with feathers stuck onto it to make it look like a bird. The idea in training is to make the falcon fly to the lure. But it does take some coaxing. Will he or won't he? What you're going to see now is a falcon attacking its prey in the wild. When it stoops, that means dives, it's travelling at some 80 miles per hour, and this is all the victims see of it. And they don't know what's hit them. Whoa, says the owl. Whoa. And here, the strike. The falconer stalls the lure at the top of a turn and the bird takes it. If he's allowed to eat the lure, he won't give up his prey when he's out hunting. So the falconer coaxes it away from him with another piece of meat. Well, I never. The last great ice age ended in Europe about 10,000 years ago. And as the ice melted, forests grew up and covered most of the continent. The forests were full of wild animals. One of the largest was the European bison, the Wiesent, or aurochs, as it was known. These animals were vital for the existence of Stone Age man. They were hunted for food, their skins were used for making clothes and tents, and they were depicted on the walls of caves. Most of you will have seen bison or buffalo in American cowboy films, but not many people know that they still live in Europe. They're bigger than the North American bison, but apart from that, they look the same. The main difference is their eating habits. The American bison grazes on grass on the open plains, whereas the European species, living mainly in the forest, is a browser and feeds mainly on leaves and bark. By the 19th century, the clearing of the forests, increased hunting, and the introduction of firearms had reduced these animals to one small herd in eastern Poland, and these were all killed during the First World War. Had man wiped out yet another species? Fortunately, there were 30 thoroughbred bison living in zoos, and with these animals, conservationists, people who protect wildlife, were able to save the species from extinction. Although bison live to about 20 years old, they don't mature until they're 3, and then only have 1 calf a year. With only 30 members of a species of animal left in the world, it was essential that every calf that was born survived. So, a small breeding herd was set up in the Białowieża Forest Reserve in Poland, and by 1956, the numbers had increased to the stage where it was safe to release some back into the forest to roam wild. Today, there are about 100,000 European bison, 150 of which are roaming wild in the Polish Białowieża forest and across the border in the Sverishkaya forest in Russia, where this film was shot. Here, protected from men with guns, they live their lives according to the seasons. The summer is a time of plenty, and there's a meal on the trees any time they want it. But when the autumn comes and the leaves start to fall, it's time to prepare for the winter, and finding food becomes the most important thing. The birds that feed mainly on insects can't find food here in the winter, so they fly south, and the birds that feed on vegetation fly in from the north. But many birds, like these tits, stay all the year round. They get what food they can before the first snows come and hide it. Winter is always a hard time for wild animals. The leaves fall from the trees and snow covers the ground. This makes things very difficult for the grazers, such as deer, and for the bison. But of course, there's always plenty of milk for the babies. Winter is even harder for flesh eaters like the wolf. They not only have to find their food, they then have to catch it. The deer's already got his scent and taken to her heels. So have the wild boars. But our wolf isn't going to give up easily. The bison could win this battle easily, but she's not interested in killing the wolf. She just wants to drive him off. As the weather gets colder and the ground gets harder and harder, the bison know that if they just stand and wait with their friends, the forest rangers will come along with a food sledge. Because even though they roam wild, they sometimes still need a little help. And it's a good way to ensure that they don't become extinct again, isn't it? We're standing in a tobacco patch in the American state of Ohio. Not the sort of place you'd expect to hear a fanfare, but on the occasion of the International Chicken Flying Contest, nothing is too good. The birds are weighed and checked for hidden motors, and those that pass the scrutineers line up at the starting gate. Now, it's about 5,000 years since the domestic chicken, then called the jungle fowl, had to fly for a living, so you can understand why some of them are a bit fat and out of practice. Others, however, seem to be in beautiful condition. Did you notice that? Rocket-like takeoff.
Not quite far enough, but a nice flight.
And how about that one for the title, Flying Stone? Not the stuff that champions are made of, is it?
The next one is Haney 7, last year's international champion.
The defending champion is about to do his stuffing. Last year, 95 feet. This year, who knows? What do you think? 10 feet? Oh, well, it means somebody else has a chance, doesn't it?
And I think there's another one, number 139.
No prizes for guessing where he's going to end up. And, as if to rub the point home, a chicken called Bob flies like a white tornado right into the tobacco patch.
That was Bob at 2.5 pounds, owned by Danny Thompson. And it looks like Bob is in the money.
But after all's said and done, even the ex-champ goes the way of all flesh. Good afternoon and welcome to the Elephants Cup final here at Paknam Stadium west of Bangkok in Thailand. At the moment, the groundsman seems to be having a slight disagreement over who should sweep the pitch after the game, but as soon as this dispute is settled, I'll give you the names of the teams in this year's game. Elephants United versus Elephants United. And it promises to be a lively game because these two teams are the direct descendants of the famous fighting elephants the Thais used in their armies. As you can see, the capacity crowd here is in good humour, and the kickoff should be any minute now. United have won the toss, and an air of expectancy settles on the ground, and they're away with a long ball down the centre. The defence are caught on the wrong forefoot, and Jumbo's going straight in there. But he's been stopped, and there's a loose ball going into the centre field, but United have got it and are pressing the United's defence. Wimbledon was never like this. Old George is starting a run now. There's none of them any good. This is really starting to look dangerous. It's over to the wing. Some of them seem to be having a little trouble with their trunks. So rough, so rough. Now it's back upfield again, and that looked like a mistake there by the United defence, which could cost them dearly. The United attack is closing in. Yes, they're coming upfield now. Will it be a goal? Can they make it this time? And there we are! And that's it. One of the shortest United matches. And then into the showers. Ah, this looks like a keg of beer. A beer barrel. Beer barrel, I meant. No doubt for the champions, who certainly have a mighty thirst. But our friend here looks as though he's going to give it up without a fight.